What is going on, my fellow Summit Chasers, and welcome to another episode of the Summit Chasers podcast, a podcast where we make success simple so that you can live extraordinary. What is going on, my fellow Summit Chasers? I'm very excited to finally get this guest onto our show. We have been talking for probably 4 or 5 months before this. Schedules, kids, animals, all that kind of stuff was trying to stop us, but this is actually kind of an ode to her book, Unstoppable Grit. We made it happen. I'd like to present to you Danielle Cobo. She is the best-selling author of Unstoppable Grit, Breakthrough, the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals. As a former Fortune 500 senior sales manager, Danielle led her team to the #1 national ranking sales team, earning the title of Regional Manager of the Year and 4 consecutive National Sales Excellence Awards. And she balances a demanding career and family life, especially during her husband's deployment as a Black Hawk pilot in Iraq. She learned to thrive under pressure. Today, Danielle dedicates her expertise to inspiring others, helping them develop the grit and resilience needed for professional and personal success. So welcome to the show, Danielle.
I am thrilled to be here, Zach.
Absolutely. That was pretty good, right? I did okay?
Yeah, I did great.
I feel like there's so much more I could have kept saying, but I want to leave that to you. So if you could really quickly tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
I started my career in medical sales. I actually followed in my mom's footsteps. My mom was a regional sales manager of a top pharmaceutical company. I followed in her footsteps, got into medical sales, where I spent a little over 15 years selling everything from capital equipment to consumables to devices. And then about 4 years ago, I left, and now I get to do what I absolutely love, which I get to do a lot of coaching and mentoring and helping people achieve their goals in sales and in their career without having to micromanage or deal with any expense reports, which is what I did not like doing as a manager. Not micromanage, but let's be real. We're all grown adults, and yet some people never get their expense reports in because no one likes to do them. So now I just get to do what I love.
That's amazing. And that's such a great story. But so there's something I wanted to touch on really quickly, because you have a very, obviously, like you just said, a very award-filled background in sales, particularly in the medical field. What kind of foundation did starting out in sales, particularly, what transferred over to your success now in your career, coaching, working with others, marketing? I know you do a lot of marketing and career advancement. What did you take from sales to this focus that you have now?
I believe a lot of the skill sets that I developed in sales transfer into what I'm currently doing now. So spending 15 years in sales, you learn everything from customer service to cold calling to prospecting to understanding and asking quality questions to understand people's challenges, their needs, their pain points, so that you are consistently delivering value. In addition, I worked in the medical aesthetic industry, and in the medical aesthetic industry and sales, a lot of what we are teaching physicians is how to market their practice, to recruit new patients, to convert patients from one treatment to another, and how to retain patients into their practice. And so a lot of my skills and marketing and developing a brand story and customer service experience developed from my experience in the medical aesthetic industry.
Oh, that's fantastic. Would you say, so as far as like advice goes, because I've worked with, we have a focus that we have. It's called the young professionals, or sorry, the early summiteers program, the young professionals. That's our summit that we have in October. But where we work with a lot of young, they're just out of college, right? And they're trying to kind of figure out, okay, where can I make my mark? How can I break into my career, as quickly and as successfully as possible? And so many of them are so scared of sales, right? There's a misconception behind what sales really is, and obviously there's some that give sales a bad name. I'm not going to say that there's not. There's a few,
always,
probably more than a few, but they're scared to cold call. They don't. They're scared of rejection and that kind of stuff. So, what would your advice be to them to kind of allow, probably to get that roadblock out of their head and to push forward and to really see sales as a great foundation to start their career?
Sales is such a fun and exciting career. And I believe that when you approach sales from a place of curiosity, in the intent to serve and help others. It's not about being a pushy sales rep. So often when I'm working with newer sales reps, they'll go into an office, they'll go into a meeting, and all they do is just list the features and benefits of their product without fully taking a step back and trying to understand through a curiosity approach as to what are that particular person's challenges, what are their needs, even is your product or service a right fit for the practice or whatever the customer is. So initially when I'm meeting with a customer, I'll thank them for their time. I'll say, hey, thank you so much for your time. Like, I'm going to ask you a few questions. And if my product or service is a great fit for your business, fantastic. If not, then I appreciate your time, because it's not always about making the sale. Of course, we want to grow our business, but it's more about how can I serve that potential client? And if they're not the right, if my service or product is not a right fit, I'm still going to build a trusting relationship with that individual, and it might lead to potential business in the future in one way, shape, or form in the future.
No, I think that's a really good way to look at it, because I mean, especially me growing up when I was first getting into sales, which was when I was 18, like right away, I'd always think back to Matilda, the dad from Matilda, the
Yeah.
sleazy car salesman. And
Oh, yes.
when he'd buy all the terrible cars, and he'd throw sawdust in the engine and make it quiet and super glue things back together. That was like my perception of sales. And I don't think that I'm sure kids these days, they probably don't know what Matilda is anymore. I'm aging myself a little bit, but they still have that kind of similar perception, but it's not. And the one, I can't remember who it was that told me this, but they said that the origination of the word sales means salis, which means to serve. It means to be of service. It means to solve problems, to help people. So if you look at it from that lens, it's a lot easier to at least let's make the first call, or let's look into how I could help people, and then how can I reach them, and how can I find them, and that kind of stuff too, right? And obviously there's such a foundation for your business. If you want to start a business, you have to figure out, okay, what am I selling? What problem am I solving? And then how do I let other people know that I can solve the problem? So there's so much there, right? As a sales, as a foundation.
Yeah.
One thing I really, this is probably the biggest reason why I wanted to have you on, well, why I wanted to connect with you anyways, was I really liked the way that you reached out to me and you started the conversation on LinkedIn. It was not pushy. It came from exactly what you just explained. It was very, I just want to find out if I can help you, right? I want to find out where you are, where are you struggling with right now, where do you want to go? Like, it was very, like, I could feel that right away. Like, my guard came down really, really quickly. What's your secret? I don't want to say what's your secret. You don't want to give away all your secrets. But what would your advice be, for people who are doing those, seemingly coldish reach outs, or developing those relationships in a digital world?
In a digital world, I mean, there's so many resources that are available that allow you the opportunity to peek into someone's business before you even meet with them, which is really nice, because back in the day before the internet was around, you would cold call. It's truly cold calling an office. You really didn't know anything about the office. These are a business or an individual that you're cold calling. But these days you can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Facebook, you can go on their website. Sometimes companies will have like the bio of the individual. And so a lot of times when you are connecting with somebody, it's finding something that there's commonality and interest in. So, hey, for LinkedIn, it might be, I notice we both work in the same medical industry, and, we have mutual connections, love to connect, just something friendly. Maybe you went to the same school, or you have similar interests. There's a lot. It's really nice when people dedicate time to their LinkedIn profile, because then you can learn a lot about somebody and find some commonality and reach out to them. It's just not that boring, generic sales call of, this is what I do, and let's schedule a call for us to talk. It's like, my time is extremely valuable. That person's time is extremely valuable. I'm not going to jump on a call unless you've done some research on me and you personalize the outreach.
So it sounds like the secret is, don't be lazy, as part of it anyways. Maybe that's a little bit too broad of but no, I think that's absolutely true, because I've seen, I mean, obviously everyone who's on any social media platform, really, they get the spam. Like, hey, I see you follow Gary V. well, me and 12 million other people.
Yeah.
So nice try though, but it's like obviously like an automated message, or at least just a lazy message, right? And that does more harm than good anymore, is all these automated spam type of messages anymore. And so it's again, go back to just don't be lazy, I think, because it's about connections. And that's an interesting thing. I'd like to get your kind of your take on this as AI, and I don't know if it's been since AI, but I've just noticed it more since AI, is that we crave more genuine, authentic interactions on any social media platform, or watching podcasts. Podcasts are really big now because they're not these scripted interviews. We're just having a conversation. And it seems like, again, we crave and we are more receptive to the authentic interactions, and we're much more like barriers up right when we get any sort of like, that could be a robot, like the Terminator just messaged me, or this is a mass message. But what are your thoughts on that kind of movement right now?
I believe that while AI has played an integral role in this need for or this desire for authenticity, I believe it started with social media in general.
No?
Because social media as a whole, there's been, you go on social media and it's these perfectly curated profiles. Let's take Instagram, for example. It's these perfectly curated profiles. It's these people that have done these, are on TikTok, and they're doing these dance routines, but you're not seeing that they practice for days on end in order to get to where they're at there. So I believe that social media as a whole has really kind of created this desire for authenticity. The life that you see on social media is not always the life that's behind closed doors. And so people are wanting more and more to really see the human element of people. And then I believe that AI has taken it even a step further, where there's so many generic messages that are being sent out, where you can tell that AI has been used, the jargon and the language that's used in it, where if I can see AI has been used, I just delete it. It's not even,
Yeah. And it's still pretty obvious. And you can try to prompt it, as much as you can. And I was playing around with it. I mean, I played around with it a lot, but I played around with it a few days ago, because I get a lot of messages now where they start out with yo Zach. I'm like, who talks like that? So I'm like, that's an AI thing. So I was playing around with some prompts, like to see how close to like human we can get it to sound. And I would say, can you make this more whatever? Can you make this more nonchalant or whatever it is? And then it would be like, yo, what's up? Like it tries too hard to go one way, right? It's like overcorrects itself. But yeah, we're definitely craving that. And I think that we also, I think over the last few years, we've also a little bit more maybe educated, like mass educated on, okay, this is AI. This is clearly AI. This person doesn't really care about me. So you're more aware of that. So then your walls go up immediately. And we kind of, again, we're definitely craving that connection. So one of the other things that I saw in yours is, well, first of all, you have a very nice LinkedIn profile.
Thank you.
That's like super attractive profile. What's your advice to those, whether they're trying to get a job, trying to grow their business? What's like the biggest, probably focal point? What's going to have the biggest impact when they're improving like their LinkedIn presence in general, but their LinkedIn profile as well?
Okay, so let's talk about the individual that is working for an organization, and then we'll approach those that are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, the business owners. So I say, so often people reach out to me and say, I'm looking for a job and I need help with my resume.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll look at their LinkedIn profile and I go, before we even get to the resume, let's get to your LinkedIn profile, because the reality is a recruiter, let's say you want to work with a recruiter, they're not going to see your resume until they see your LinkedIn profile.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe in attracting your dream job, not spending hours on end applying to jobs. Because one of the challenges that's going on right now in the job market is a lot of these organizations use applicant tracking systems. So they're using AI to accept these resumes. Then they're taking a job description, which is typically outdated job description, and they're looking at someone's resume and they're saying how many of the keywords match, and then it's a match score. And then what happens is they get filtered. The higher the match score gets filtered to the top. And then the internal talent acquisition manager will review resumes and then send it off to the hiring manager. Now, on average, statistically, according to JobVite, the average online job or online posting receives 250 applications. The company that I worked for, our average applications was 350. And when I was a hiring manager, I only typically received about 5 resumes from the talent acquisition manager that were forwarded to me.
Five
So
out of the 350.
5. That's it.
Wow.
I've never, in my 7 years as a hiring manager, I've never hired anybody who submitted their resume from an online application. There's many times I've hired people who applied online. However, their resume did not go through the applicant tracking system with a high match score. However, they reached out directly to me through a referral or through LinkedIn. So when I'm working with job seekers, I'll say, hey, you know what? Yes, you still, and a lot of times, need to apply to the job online, but let's invest time in developing your brand on LinkedIn so that when recruiters are using the Recruiter Lite LinkedIn program and they're saying, I'm looking for an individual in this location with this skill set, with this many years of experience, your LinkedIn profile is coming up on top. In addition, let's expand your network of recruiters. Let's get you in contact with recruiters that are within your industry. And let's say you see a job posting online. Let's find out who the hiring manager is for that job posting so that you can forward your resume directly through LinkedIn to that hiring manager. So you're going to increase the chances of your resume being viewed by human eyes. So
that 5 out of 350. So when you're saying like using online platforms, you're talking like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, those types of platform.
Either it's Indeed, ZipRecruiter, Monster.com, or they're job posting directly from the website or LinkedIn.
They
all filter through the same applicant tracking system.
So they usually use the same applicant tracking system. So that's a really good point, that like focusing on your own personal brand, because a lot of people don't think like I just got out of school, I don't have a brand.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of do. You definitely do. So what would that be with somebody who doesn't really understand? Maybe they only understand like obviously like business have a brand, like Nike has a brand, right? But what is my brand? What does that mean for the individual?
So for you, it like in sales, for example, it might be, what is your approach to sales? That could be part of your brand.
Okay.
If you are, I had a client who's a VP of operations. So his tagline was, oh gosh, I'm going to try to remember off the top of my head. It was taking complex challenges into easy and executable solutions. So it's operations. So when you're talking about developing your brand presence online, it's not only how can you build your comprehensive profile, everything from your headline, your about section. So your headline, you can have 220 characters. Your about section, you can have 2,600 characters. You can have up to 100 skills that are on your LinkedIn profile. And so ensuring that you have all of that built out that represent your skill set, and how does it translate into the roles that you're applying to, and how does it communicate your career story and who you are as a person. So like one thing I'll say in the about section is I'll work with job seekers and I'll say, okay, we're going to talk about the about section is an overview of your career. And at the bottom of it, I'll just say, what are 3 of the most interesting things that most people don't know about you, right? So for me, I say, I've done 2 60-mile walks. So when somebody looks, it's 3 days, I walked 20 miles 3 days in a row, and I walked 60 miles in 3 days. But that's a conversation starter. Somebody might look at my profile and be like, wow, she really does represent grit and resilience professionally and personally. So it's letting people, have a peek into who you are as a person, professionally and personally.
That might be tough for some people on 2 different ends, right? They either go too wild and go too like I'll use your example of I see your reaction. Use your example of their strategy or their idea around how their sales and their sales process and their sales beliefs and that kind of stuff. How do you know when to how do you know when you've gone too far, I guess, so to speak, other than like you're just not getting a job? Because you can go one way and you can go 100% just reposting all of, what's the guy's name? He's bald and he yells a lot. Andy Elliott, just reposting a lot of Andy Elliott stuff. And then on the other end, you don't brand yourself at all,
at
or you're
all.
not really sure how to, like, where's the line? How do you know when you've gone too far?
Yeah. So I first want to talk in about posting, right? So LinkedIn has a social selling index and it measures your brand presence online. So it looks at, do you have a comprehensive profile? Are you engaging with insights? Like, are you sharing content where people are wanting to engage in conversations? Are you finding the right people? And then there's a fourth one too. So there's 4 different components that build up the LinkedIn social selling index. Among one of those components is engaging in insights. So are you sharing content where people want to have value, or adding to the conversation? They see value in it. If you're just reposting other people's contents, you're actually not going to get a lot of views on that post. And the reason being is because it's not originally from your profile. And LinkedIn wants to reward people that are creating and sharing original content. Now, when you're talking about what's the balance between sharing your personal and undersharing and oversharing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's great to have a profile, but if you really want to take your career to the next level, there is a quote by Tara Jane Frank, and she's the VP of cultural for Hallmark. And she
Mhm.
says, people don't get promoted for doing their job well. They get promoted for the potential to do more.
Ooh.
So it's
Ooh.
profound. It's a quote that I had above my desk. So if you're in an individual contributor role, but you're
Mhm.
going on LinkedIn and you're sharing your insights on what leadership means to you,
Mhm.
you're already showing the potential to do more in a leadership role, which could grab the attention of either people in your organization or other organizations that might say, wow, this person's got great experience. They talk a lot about leadership. I want to and open up a conversation, potentially discuss them coming in a leadership role for my company. But the overshare. So I think there's value in being vulnerable while also sharing how you can take challenging situations and communicate it that's still professional.
Mhm.
So I talk about my upbringing. I share some very vulnerable moments on my LinkedIn profile. I was kidnapped by my mom when I was 2.5 years old. I didn't meet my dad till I was 15. I lost my mom to suicide in March of 2020, and I share a lot of that stuff on LinkedIn, which it's very raw, vulnerable challenges that I've gone
Mhm.
through. And I talk, but the difference is I don't just talk about all these horrible things that took place in my life. I talk about, what did I learn from that experience?
Mhm.
Well, my grit and resilience came from, being raised by a single mom who I saw her going to school full time and raising a 5-year old while serving. And I saw her rise from having nothing, rise up the corporate ladder and being a regional sales manager for one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world.
Mhm.
So I talk about, here's this challenge, but here's what she was a role model and what I learned from it. And it tells this story. So that's where I believe you can be vulnerable and share your challenges while you talk about what you learned and how did it shape you into the person you are today, and why is that a characteristic that adds value to any organization that might be bringing you in.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I mean, it's part of your brand. Like, what
Mhm,
makes it so unique, right? And if you're on there and you're just, like you said, just quoting, again, we'll go back to sales because it's an easy analogy.
mhm,
You're just quoting a whole bunch of these other, you're quoting Cole Gordon, Andy Elliott, and all these people.
yeah,
That's just showing that, okay, he reads a lot and he
mhm,
will probably continue to be a good salesperson, right? Which is
mhm,
fine if that's what you want to do. But if and I liked what you said before, where it kind of gives you an idea into their potential. So what you post on and what you share, it's like proof of your potential on there as well. So you can see, like you said, somebody would be like, oh, he has some great concepts around leadership. He just broke down a case study on why strong leadership and accountability in sales is so important. There's proof of potential there. And then with the brand part, like, I think we see a successful brand or an individual with a successful brand, like, I'm just going to do that. Then they have no differentiator. Like,
mhm,
your differentiator is that you've actually had to go through all these things, and your brand is the grit and resilience. And it's just more proof of brand, and it stacks more intricacies on top of your brand that makes it more and more unique.
Mhm. Yeah, I've kind of grown up, and I it's interesting because I just had this conversation the other day, where I was talking to somebody and we had this conversation. He was asking me some questions about myself and my background, and I kind of shared what I had just shared with you. And he goes, "Do you tell people that story?" And I go, "Well, why? I'm just curious." And he goes, "I feel like people would." He's like, "I don't want to be." He's like, "I don't really know how to say this, but like." When people look at you at first, they probably have one opinion until they get to know you. And I said, "You're absolutely right. A lot of people look at me and think that I had this easy life, that a lot was handed to me, and it was not. I had a
Mhm.
very troubling upbringing and was out on my own at 17 and worked 2 jobs through college. And so, just like if you are uh if I'm going to be pursuing a sales job, I'm going to tell the story of like what brought me into sales. And it was like I worked 2 jobs in college, and I really had this goal, and this is where the grit and resilience come from. If you're a business owner and you want to create that know, like, and trust factor with the
Mhm.
people that you want to work with, you want to attract the type of people that you want to work with, then start sharing your story and speaking to that individual. And oftentimes, like for coaches and consultants, you're best to serve the person you once were.
Mhm. Mhm. That I had to figure that out the hard way. I think a lot of people probably do. So hopefully those who are listening to us don't do it the hard way. But I had, I'm not gonna say I had a similar background, but I was a drug addict at a young age, and I was homeless for a short period of time. And so I had to kind of get to where I'm at just through rubbing dirt in it, like my dad always says. But if you don't share that, you're not going to relate with as many people. And like what you just said is so powerful. You're not going to be able to help, or it's going to be you're going to attract more of your younger self or your less experienced self, and you're going to help them not make the same mistakes that you did. And that's so powerful, because I just did a talk, and how I found out as I did a talk. We work with a nonprofit in Atlanta, safe place for like underprivileged youth and troubled youth, and they're homeless. Some terrible stories, but they come into this program, and I came and presented to them. And when I started out, I didn't share that what I just shared with you,
Mhm.
and you could see that they're leaning back, like whatever, they're kids, right? Like
Yeah.
16 to 20-year olds, and
What
they
does
don't.
this guy know about
Yeah,
anything I've
what
been
does he know? What does he exactly?
through?
And then I was wearing a long shirt or a long jacket, so I took my jacket off so you could see all my tattoos and that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then I started getting a little bit more vulnerable with them. I was like, "Look, I understand you probably don't want to listen to some dude up here who has nothing in common with you. But what if I told you that maybe we did?" And then I went into that, and then the rest of the day we talked business, we did challenges, I told them, like, telling 16 to 20-year-old kids to like take accountability and responsibility for their life, like they're not going to listen to that, but they're so engaged, like, oh, maybe I do.
Mhm.
So your ability to lower those barriers and connect with people could be the difference between you actually helping them
Mhm.
and them even knowing that they need help and not. So you have the ability to help more people too if you're vulnerable like that.
You know what you gave them? You gave them hope to
Hmm.
know that just because they're in the circumstances that they're in doesn't mean that they need to stay there. And what you showed them is that if you take accountability and you make changes, there's hope to change the life.
Hmm.
And so it's so refreshing to hear somebody be vulnerable and share their challenges and what they learn from it and what they would do differently and how it can support these other people. I bet you there's one person, at least one person that is going to change their life.
Hmm. Yeah, well, and same with your story too. And there's a big misconception that you need to have this. I'm not going to say easy, but I'm going to say predictable
Mhm.
road to success. Right? I think there's lots of that. Even with all the amazing stories that are out there, like you can read some amazing books. There's some amazing movies, stories of people that come from nothing and then become very successful. At least whatever that definition is for them. But there's still a lot of people that define themselves based on a bad experience that they had when they were younger, or where they grew up, what their last name is, how they
Mhm.
look, all this kind of stuff. So to hear that and to again, it's more proof. It's proof that it can be done, and it's proof that they don't have to live the life that it has been ingrained in their head for so long. And that's, I mean, and even for, people who did go to college and it did grow up, wealthy, or not struggling type of thing. It's even for them. I'm not going to discount them, because a lot of amazing people have gone through and become successful and done amazing things. Mm-hmm. But even for them, life is tough. Life is tough. So as a more vulnerable, again, whatever. Like, I love this quote. I can't remember where I got the quote from, but it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. So your perception is that, right? So you could have, somebody who just got out of college, right? They had a relative or the parents paid for college, and they get out of college, and it's tough, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they're in a little bit of debt, they're having trouble finding the job, right? And they think, oh, I'm such a failure in my parents' eyes, and that kind of stuff like that. For them, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to them, and they're down, they're struggling. So even for them to hear these types of stories, it's still, it can help a lot of people, and it can draw a lot of people to you. It's just, how do I present it in a way that brings them in and isn't just like a poor me type of thing.
Yeah. There was once Dr. Brian Davidson. I had a conversation with him on my podcast, Unstoppable Grit, and he provided this great perspective. A lot of times he'll encourage people to take a piece of paper and write a line down the middle. And on the left side, you'll say, what's happened to me? And on the right side, write down, what have I overcome? Because we have a choice to be victim of our circumstances, or to take the circumstances, learn and grow and be better. Mm-hmm. But it's all in how we frame it for ourselves.
I like that. What was his name? Sorry.
Dr. Brian Davidson.
Why do I recognize that name? I don't know why I recognize that name.
I don't know.
Did he write a book?
No, he has not written a book yet. I say yet because I've been encouraging him to.
Yeah, you get him to write a book. No, that's really, really great advice. Really, really great advice.
He talks a lot about grit and resilience as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you read the book Grit?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I would say that's like, at first I was like, did she? Because when I was reading your introduction, I was like, did she write that book? I got too excited. I was like, oh, dang it, no.
No, Angela Duckworth. Angela. So Carol Dweck Dr. Carol Dweck did the research on growth mindset, and then Angela Duckworth did the research on grit. So both of them kind of combined in together.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. But everybody should buy your book though. For sure. That's going to be kind of, LinkedIn's interesting. Like, it's such an echo chamber sometimes of, like, people will read somebody's post, like giving their opinion or an experience or whatever it is, and then they'll take that and be like, ooh, I could make that, like, I could talk crap about it, or I could break that down and why it's wrong, or I could expand on it, whatever it is. And grit, the term grit was one, and this probably because I knew that you were coming up on the podcast, so I was paying attention to the word grit more, so it looked like it was coming up more. But it looked like there are some people that are kind of going back and forth on and almost debating about what grit means. I want to ask from the Queen of Grit herself, that's a big title. What is define grit?
So Angela Duckworth, like I said, she did a lot of research on grit, and she says that passion and perseverance towards long-term goals is what grit is. And if you watch her TED Talk, the reason why I was so fascinated by this is because she put together the research of what I've always believed. I've never been a great student. I was never the student that got A's and B's. In fact, I was on academic probation in high school. However, I grew a very successful business and had a very successful career. And ultimately, when she was doing her research, she says it wasn't always the smartest kids that were successful in life. If you really track them, it's the kids that were able to fail and then pick yourself back up. And some people will say that, I don't believe in failure. Failure is something that you either succeed or you have an opportunity to learn and grow. You're not necessarily really failing, because if you have a choice to say, oh, I just failed, or what can I learn from this? And then you're always taking something beneficial out of it. I've learned more from when I haven't achieved something than versus sometimes when I have. But I truly believe that grit is really, it's that persistence. It's the persistence to keep going. It's the willingness to not give up, to pick yourself back up, to grow and adopt this mindset that we are not, the way we're born is not always the way we have to be. We can grow as individuals with time if we allow ourselves to.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on strategies to overcome fear?
So, fear is something that is false evidence appearing real.
I love that. Yeah.
A lot of times, what we fear doesn't necessarily happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's so often so sometimes we will fear what could potentially happen. So we create stories in our head. Well, this could happen or that could happen. Or fear is created out of a situation where there's the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're a job seeker and you have fear of like, well, what if I can't find a job? Well, what if you can find a job? Maybe it's going to take a little bit longer than you thought initially, but what if you can? So a lot of times when somebody's experiencing fear, I will ask them, do you believe that that fear is an assumption or a fact?
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of a 10, it is an assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going back into, okay, well, what's creating that fear? And a lot of times it goes back to childhood, like what's happened in our childhood. Our most formidable years happen between the ages of 0 and 8. And so a lot of our perceptions of others and perceptions of ourselves come from when we're younger.
Mm-hmm.
So a fear of not getting a job may be an insecurity from when we were a child of not being accepted on the playground. So it's not only like, is it an assumption or is it a fact? And if it's an assumption, well, let's kind of dig in around a little bit. Where do you think that's coming from? And how
Mm-hmm.
can we shift the perspective for you so that we can overcome that fear?
Yeah. No, that was really good advice. And it kind of aligns with, I mean, other advice that you see. There's lots of advice on this, but it's kind of like the three steps. It's awareness, understanding, and then intention. So being aware
Mhm,
that maybe you do have a bias or a preconception in your head that makes you, fall into that flight or flight, or what's the other freeze, fear,
mhm, mhm,
quicker. And then understanding where it comes from. So like you said, it could be something that came up, maybe it's in your childhood, or maybe you have something similar to this has happened
mhm,
before, and you're right, you automatically go back there. But as understand it, and then intention is to put in, to utilize or practice strategies to overcome it. And I like what you said. It basically is you create space between yourself and what you are afraid of actually happening, right? When
mhm.
you create that space, you can kind of be like, okay, is this, was it assumption, or what was the other one, assumption or
Assumption or fact?
that's the assumption or fact? Is it an assumption or is it a fact? And then when you create that space, you can go through that kind of mental gymnastics of like asking yourself those questions. Okay, is this something that probably hasn't happened yet? Do I have proof of it happening before? No, not really. I've never been here before. So why am I assuming that this is happening? And then you feel a little bit better. You created even more space, and it's like, okay, now I can implement a strategy, whatever that is, whether it's meditation, whether it's just coming up with an action plan or whatever it is. You can do that. But that advice is amazing because it's just, let's create space first. Let's be
Mhm,
aware of the fact that I do jump to assumptions and this fear overwhelm mode, understand why it's coming up, and then let's come up with some strategies to overcome it.
mhm. What were the 3 things that you said? I really liked how you put that down.
Awareness,
Awareness,
understanding, and then intention.
awareness, understanding, intention.
And
Like that.
intention. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was, I can't remember where I got that from. I didn't think I can't remember where I got it from, but there's a great book on like, it's fairly new too. It's called like what real toughness is. Actually, I think I have it right here somewhere. But it's gonna be really loud. Knock over all my books. There it is. That's not even it. I'm gonna get it. Oh, it's called Do Hard Things,
Oh, okay.
by Steve Magnus.
Like it.
It's it's a pretty cool take on like what it really takes to, what it really means to be resilient. Like we,
Mhm,
especially as men, like it really resonated with me. It'll resonate with everybody, but especially with men, because early on and just in culture in general through thousands of years, our version of toughness was ignore emotions, ignore pain, just push
mhm,
through it, push it down, right? I can't
mhm,
remember what
mhm.
that joke was, but just, you just hide it down, push it down, and you just push through it like that. Ignore the pain. Whereas his take is more, understand it, understand it. And some of the best runners. So he was a long distance runner, and he worked with a lot of long distance runners, like ultra marathon runners. So they did like what you did. They would run 200 miles at a time, right? And these are some of these races, and he worked with a lot of them, and he especially like in the psychographic capacity. Whereas when your like feet are falling apart, literally, like you have no nails on your toes anymore, how do you push through that? And he was initially expecting them, to say, "Oh, I just ignore it," or I pinch myself, right, or whatever it is. I focus on the scenery of where I'm running because usually they run in really cool places, but like no, they actually they paid attention to it. They locked in on it because then when they're aware of it and they can understand it, then they can come up with strategies to overcome it, to work through it. So if they understood it, they're like, okay, my foot is like falling off right now. Probably pulling over and getting it bandaged up would be the best, course of action. Or I'm getting a leg cramp. Is it really a leg cramp? Can I, change my running gait a little bit to take some pressure off that one? So it's not the toughness isn't about just ignoring it, pushing it aside. It's about going through those 3 steps again, being aware of it, understanding it, and then coming up with strategies to overcome it. And that is kind of the basis of like what real toughness, mental toughness especially, is.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I love how we're shifting our culture. And being married to somebody who's in the military community is very much so tough through it, just keep going. And it's kind of like, and you wonder why these soldiers are coming back and struggling with PTSD is because they've just pushed it down so much. They're not actually addressing it and being aware of kind of what's causing or what's contributing to some of the emotions that they're having, and finding the right coping mechanisms to work through it.
Yeah. And that was actually something that was in there too, was the chapter was like, did the military get it right? And it's actually, I don't know if this is scary or cool. The military actually is they're kind of in the forefront of developing this type of mental toughness. Now, back in the day, 20 years ago, it probably not, but now they're in the forefront of, because that's when you're in those types of situations, right? When you're in the firefight and there's so much going on, just pushing through the fear isn't necessarily the best choice. It's being aware of what's going on, understanding what's my next course of action, and then putting the strategy in place really quickly, being able to do that really quickly. So that was an interesting take in there as well. Yeah, I'm excited for you to read that one. I definitely recommend it. And anybody listening to this, I recommend it. Actually, that's a good question. What are some of your best reads for, let's say you're a young professional, you want to advance your career, or maybe you want to, shift laterally, right? You want to get into a new position in a new company. What are some maybe like your top 1 or 2 books that you would recommend them read?
Start with Why by Simon Sinek. That really helped me understand, a lot of times we define success as climbing the corporate ladder and making a certain income. And what I've learned is really understand your why. And really what is fulfilling to you and why you do the things that you do. So I'd say start with Why. If you're in sales, one of my favorite books, I read this after my first year of being in medical equipment sales, and it's 20 Days to the Top by Brian Sullivan. And after reading that book is when I earned 4 consecutive awards for top performance in President's Club. And the principles that I learned in that book took me on throughout my whole career. So I definitely highly recommend that book. And then if you're stepping into a leadership role, one of my favorite 2 books, actually, Breaking All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, which is what first-time managers do. And then the other one is a 1-Minute Manager.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great one. Yeah, we're filling up all your bookshelves. Sorry, add them to your cart. Those are great. Those are really great recommendations. Really great recommendations. Yeah, everyone's gonna be reading for a month after this one.
I got a huge library, so that's just a few of them that I've read. But I got a huge library to the right of me.
Since we started living on the road, I had a huge library, and I've had to downsize quite a bit. But now, since we've been on the road, we've passed a lot of really cool little cute like small town bookstores. So I've kind of might have loaded up a little bit since then, but yeah, but that's one of the best things you can do is to read. And I mean, whether it's on a Kindle or even audio, whatever it is, I like holding the books. I like to be able to take notes. Yeah, I like the feeling of it, right? I feel more accomplished. I don't know, it's in my head, but there is something about, it's almost like when you work out, like if you read for an hour a day, or you exercise for an hour a day, you get like, no matter what I accomplished, I'm a bit better. I'm, half a percent, right, more educated, or fitter, healthier, whatever it is. If you can do those things like that, that helps at least carry momentum into whatever you're doing, right? But
Mhm.
no, that this has been amazing. There's a point that I wanted to bring up as you were talking about the books, and I can't remember what it is, but I might come back to it. But until then, Danielle, I am so thankful that we were able to get this on the books and we were able to bring this out to everybody. It was super valuable for everybody listening. I know that for a fact. But where can everybody find you if they wanted to work with you, or if they wanted to know a little bit more about what you do and how you can help them? Where would they find you?
Well, you can definitely find me on any social media platform. However, my favorite platform is always going to be LinkedIn. So I'm constantly posting on LinkedIn, sharing insights on ways to develop in your career, to increase your sales, personal stories on developing grit and resilience. So LinkedIn, and then my website, DanielleCobo.com. And then people can purchase the book Unstoppable Grit, Break Through the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals on Amazon. And there is an audio version too, which I narrated.
You narrated? How long did
I
that take?
did. Took me 4 days to narrate
Oh,
it.
that's actually not as long as I thought. I don't know. I pictured how long at a time? 4 days, but how long were you in the studio?
I was in the studio all day. So I was
Oh,
no, I was in 6 hours, 6 hours each
that's
day.
chill. Reading out loud for 6 hours. That's all day.
It was with several breaks, because what I found is a lot of times, I mean, I've read the book so many times from editing it and making revisions, that what I would read would sometimes be different than what I would say.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what the
Mhm.
words were different than what I was putting in my head. And so the reason why it takes so much time in the studio is every word has to be exactly the same. You can't change anything according to
Yeah,
Amazon. So that's what takes a while for the recording. But it was a fun
yeah,
experience. It was a really
yeah.
fun
That
experience.
was that's cool. No, everybody get the book. I'm gonna get the book. So I highly recommend it. But Daniel, I'm gonna give you a minute, maybe even take two if you want. What is the next summit that you are chasing?
Ooh, the next summit I am chasing. I am chasing being more present with my family. So for a long time, I tied my success to my job title, my income, to climbing the corporate ladder. Then when I started my business, it was I wanted to be this keynote speaker that's on every single stage, and my business started to grow, but I realized I wasn't being fully present. And I've really kind of taken that definition of what success looks like, and it's at the end of the day, it's being a great mom to my kids so that they can flourish and thrive and learn and grow, to be an amazing supportive wife to my husband, and to serve my clients. And if I can be successful in those three, then life is great.
That is a beautiful thing. That is an absolutely beautiful thing, and that's something that I think everybody should take a lesson from. Is often do it often. Don't just do it once when you're 22 years old coming out of college. What kind of life do I want to live? Ask yourself that at 22, 25,
Mhm.
because the answer is going to change. And then you could realize, you could wake up one day, this isn't the life I want to live. My
Mhm.
kids don't even talk to me. We're having troubles, in my relationship with my significant other. I'm just not home as often. Like, this isn't what I want. Right. And it's better to ask yourself that question a little bit more often, so that you
Mhm.
don't have any regrets, especially those types of regrets. Because you can't get back time. You can't get back time, and it's so much longer. It takes so much longer to build back trust, especially in those
Mhm.
that are so close to you. So ask yourself that question off. That is an amazing lesson to end this podcast off of. But Daniel, do you have anything else that you want to say to everybody watching?
The only thing else I'd say is when you believe in yourself, others will believe in you too. So make sure that you're starting with yourself.
I got nothing out of that. That was beautiful. And everybody, thank you so much for being here. And until next time, keep chasing your next summit.